Stuart, hi, great to meet you and great to have you on today's Spotlight interview. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure. My name's Stuart Elwell. I'm a physiotherapist and owner of Dudley Physiotherapy Clinic. Dudley Physio Clinic has been in the Dudley area for close to 50 years, and myself as a physiotherapist have been doing this for 20 years now, just coming up to 21 years. I've been the owner of Dudley Physio Clinic for around 5 years, and kind of taking over what has been quite a great heritage in the past of real kind of honest, hands-on physiotherapy, delivering people kind of what's needed to help people rehabilitate. And I think the need and demand has got ever greater over the past few years, really. With information to hand for everybody, it's a very confusing world. You can go online and Google why your arm's tingling, but you can come out with a million different answers that aren't exactly going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So we're here to kind of steer that ship, really, and give you the insight and honest information, along with kind of direction, really, about where you need to go.
Brilliant.
Yeah, historically, obviously, I'm a physio. I've not gone very far. I went to Coventry University, and I've just moved back to Dudley to do all my placements, and then fortunately got a job here. Probably for 5 years, stayed in my grounding years in the NHS, and then moved into working professional football for a few years. Okay. After which, kind of felt that the timing was right to be able to have a little bit more flexibility in doing what I needed to do, and moved into the private sector for the past 10 years.
Right.
And serving everybody from, athletes to general public in what I know best to do, really.
Fantastic. So the practice has been around for 50 years, you said.
Yeah, close to 50 years, yeah.
Fairly well established name. Tell us a little bit about what makes you stand out from the competition, because you always also mentioned that there's a lot of people around in the neighbourhood. So what makes you different, would you say, Stuart?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like our competitors as such, but are obviously the NHS. The private sector probably accounts for around 20% of physiotherapists, and we as a private provider are often providing the fast access to being able to assess people and provide treatment for acute injuries, or injuries that require more sort of constant care, really. What sets us apart generally is our experience. Staff here, we accrue quite a great deal of experience, being able to provide not only what the evidence says should help, but actually does help as well, and having this accountability both to ourselves as clinicians, but also to patients, that are requiring us to have our expertise delivering what they need to get them better, really. We are a standalone clinic. I'm standing in one of our 5 treatment rooms next to a gym, which a lot of other practices don't necessarily have. We have dedicated staff to answer calls. We have a friendly face to greet you if you were to walk through the door, which sets us apart, really. That personal experience is important. And I think in healthcare, generally having a person to speak to and someone to have advice provided in the early instances, whether this is the right thing to do, is really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Thank you. So you mentioned that you've been in the business 5 years now. So 5 years behind you. If I were to ask you, what does the next 5 years hold for you? What are your aspirations for the business, Stuart?
Sure, yeah, the last 5 years have been an interesting one for everybody in business.
Right.
So they've allowed me to kind of refocus a little bit, really, on what we plan to do for the next 5 years. And essentially what we're looking to try and do is develop a little bit more growth to build what we have here to work to full capacity. Along with that growth, just to really consolidate on the quality of provision of our services. The virtual world has helped a little bit in terms of the provision of training and be able to keep in touch with people that I kind of call hybrid physiotherapy at the moment. So we have clients coming from quite far for physiotherapy, and I feel that we can continue that relationship moving forward. Treating people virtually, checking in with people through a telephone call, through telehealth. Enables us to really kind of keep a steer on what's going on. So the next 5 years essentially would be to really embrace that online learning and online treatment market, to enable that to continue, along with really sort of building what we have here and be able to provide an all-in-one both treatment for when you definitely need it if you have an acute injury, but also that opportunity for a review to check in, to guide, to steer, not only from a health perspective if people have got injuries, but also from a wellness point of view, to be able to give people kind of the right sort of physical activities and physical advice to help keep themselves healthy and moving forward.
Fantastic. Sounds great. So long and varied path to here then, in terms of through the world of sport and various other avenues. And now here we are in the business. So what would you say has been your biggest learning since you became the business owner, Stuart?
I think the biggest learning is essentially to try and sort of embrace the challenges, really. I think sometimes, people go, okay, you're too busy, you're stressed, it's not essentially that, you're too busy, it's just not planning your time well. So having kind of two ways, really, the gratitude and sort of, being thankful that we've got a lot of work, but also being able to look after yourself, really, and to say, essentially, if I'm working 12 hours a day on the tools, essentially, is the quality of my service going to be what it should be? Perhaps not. So I've perhaps learned to take a step back a little bit more recently and to, have breaks and find that, time away and having a little break is not necessarily a bad thing. It helps in the long run. And also as kind of my 18, like looking back when I first started, I'll take kind of, as much work as I can, when essentially now the quality is more important than the volume. And I think that's essentially what we do as a clinic. We do look to provide that massive quality difference, both from what we're providing early and the instances of people just want to try and book in, is that information correct? But also the service that we provide offers that too. So the quality is more important than the quantity. From a perspective on paper, it looks great to see that we've got, we're working 12 hours a day, but that's not great for anybody in the long run. So from a longevity point of view and quality provision point of view, it's good to look after yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic learning, actually. It's easy to just climb on the treadmill and run like hell, isn't it? So especially if you've got lots of work coming at you, but
exactly.
Great. Yeah.
I think the old adage of never being good, try not to be a busy fool. You can make yourself as busy as you like, but is it worth it in the long run? And is it worth it for the people that you're able to provide your service and care for, really? I don't think it is.
I think that's a really great point. And I think a lot of people will probably identify with that. It's easily done. And stop it. So what would you say the biggest challenge has been? I mean, I know there's been some obvious sort of side swipes in the past couple of years, the 5 years that you've been running your business, but what would you say the biggest challenge has been, Stuart?
Obviously, the biggest challenge is kind of, I think, in kind of the throes of the pandemic is, when's this going to end? That was the first challenge. When am I going to return to normal? What's normal going to look like? And am I going to be able to continue? I think with everything, perspective is very important. Everyone's going to go through it at the same time. Taking a step back and observing the kind of trends and what's changing and what we can still do, that's going to be very important. Looking for perhaps little gaps in the marketplace, but still sort of retaining that the kind of perception, really, that what do you do there? What do you offer? What do you do differently? Sort of retaining that visibility is important. Me as a physio, generally, physios are everywhere, but essentially what I tend to offer is a more holistic stand back approach, that the time outside this building and what people do is probably way more important than when they're here. But what is important for me to do here is to ensure that that's looked after really well. If people have a belief, understanding, consistency outside of this building, that's way more important. So I think the challenge was to kind of retain sight on that, really, and that we could still continue to kind of bring that perception around still in both post-pandemic times and this current financial crisis times as well. Everyone's having to pay more for things, and the provision of private physiotherapy is perhaps seen now as, not a necessity. When people are in agony, I don't know what is not a necessity, really, but the quality and the assurances that we're delivering the utmost highest standard of care that has the best outcomes is far more important than it ever was for people paying it, you know.
So it's interesting there, because it sounds like the challenge might have presented you with some opportunities as well.
Absolutely.
How would you?
Waiting are growing. The sort of the rations on provision are still continuing to be there. So the shortfalls are getting bigger and bigger. So we're continuing to try and meet those needs, really, providing fast access to services and providing, you know, what people need, really. That's probably been the demands we've seen recently, but also the costs of living, everything going through the roof, the quality of service and the quality of care needs to be there for everybody.
Great. Cool. Thank you. So, what would you do differently if you had your time again?
As a physio?
As it was, let's confine it to the business owner part, perhaps. But if you want to expand it out and answer both questions, please feel free.
I mean, as a business owner, potentially having a little bit more patience in the early years would perhaps be a benefit. So rather than to try and meet targets fast, perhaps to stretch those out a little bit, really. Okay. I'd perhaps do that differently. Perhaps refining the offering rather than spreading the breadth of the offering would probably be a different approach I would have done. So rather than trying to offer everything, try and offer a smaller kind of palette of things with a little bit more in the way of investment in what they do. Those kind of things would have been a little bit of a different approach, perhaps, but it kind of worked. It was just it was the busyness of it, really, just being too hectic early on when there's a lot of other things you're trying to learn and take a grasp of in those early throes of owning the business.
So what you're saying is take a little bit of pressure off yourself and maybe niche a little bit more to make your offering more defined and clearer. Absolutely. I think there are quite a few people that could probably benefit from those two things as well. So great points, thank you. And lastly then, Stuart, what would be your one piece of advice that you give to other business owners? I think be patient, really, when you're kind of first setting up as a business. I think ensuring that the things will happen and having a real big belief in what you offer, you know, what you deliver as a service, what stands you apart, and kind of constantly coming back to it. There's always going to be bad times and there's always going to be good times. And I think trying to retain focus on where you're going is very important, to not get ahead of yourself in those good times and not let the bad times bring you down, just to take you off that focus, really. So I think have a set goal in mind, with miniature goals as well, what you're looking to achieve each week, each month, each year, and to just constantly look back at that and say, okay, are you still doing that? Yeah, still doing it. Are we still improving? We're still improving. It may not be what you expected, but if it's the needle's moving in the right direction, you're succeeding and things are going the right way for you. Yeah, I think that's a really great point and a suitable note to end this interview on. So, Stuart, thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for the insights on your business. All of your contact details will be down below below this video. So if anybody needs sorting out, backs cricking, sorry, I'm not a physio, or whatever else you need doing sorting out, then please give Stuart a call. Thanks for your insight, Stuart, and thank you very much. Best of every success for your business going forward. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.